final project, I chose teaching with care and compassion, and my specific question was, what ways can we show we care as teachers? So to open, I chose this topic because I think it can make one of the biggest differences in someone's life. I would love to share why it's so important to me specifically, and that we can all benefit from these skills as future teachers. So compassion can really be overlooked, but it's extremely important. So when I was younger, I had specific teachers that showed more compassion than others, and I value that connection more than they probably know, and it really helped me. So I felt a lot better about coming to school and having a support system. Specifically, I know I've mentioned this a few times already, but I have an immune disorder, so my body lacks white blood cells, so I can't really fight off infection and bacteria, sickness, any kind by myself as well as other kids. So this leads to me missing a lot more school because I get sick a lot. So I had a lot of teachers that would be angry that they had to catch me up, and when I returned, and they would tell me that they didn't have time for me, and like that I just kept missing and it's my fault, and it was just really upsetting, obviously. And then I would have teachers that would stay after class with me, or after school even, or before school. I remember coming in early and they would help me get caught up. They would help me with whatever they could. They would help me prepare for the tests and the material I missed, and they would even exempt me from things, because a lot of times it was at the end of the year where there was way too much stuff to catch up on, and they would just kind of scratch it out. And it was unmanageable sometimes with the time frame, but it was super helpful. So those same teachers would often ask how I was feeling. They would email my parents homework, and they would give them homework. Like, my parents would go pick it up for me at school. They kept in touch with me and my parents, which led to great communication, and I was super thankful for that in my time of need. So another scenario that is super important to me was when I was in elementary school, is when my oldest brother first left for the Marine Corps. And this was really hard on me because I personally didn't know if my whole family didn't know if he would be coming back and if he was okay every single day. And I was super young. I didn't really even understand it. I was like 4 years old when the first deployment. So I really needed that emotional support system. So this was really awesome because I often cried in school, and I was super lucky that I had teachers that were really understanding, and they would talk to me and pull me aside and have conversations with me, give me that support, whatever I needed. They honestly were so great, and I felt so much better. It truly made an impact on my education as a whole. And even when I moved on to other schools, like middle school and high school, I could still talk to those same people, and they still had a connection with my family as well, which was super awesome. And I feel like that really doesn't happen often. So my future goals are to use these skills that I'll present, and to help my students feel comfort and have a place where they feel welcomed and can share whatever they need. I want to be there for them instead of standing there and just lecturing, teaching, reading off a board every day, just getting through the lesson plan. I want to go that extra mile because I think that makes for a great teacher. So now that you know my stories of compassion and why it's so important to me, coming from a teacher, let's take a look into the research and why it's so important and how we can use it. So the first article I found is actually the one that we read from class, so many of you may be familiar with it, but if not, it's a great refresher. So it's called Compassion as a Classroom Management Tool. So the author tells us that centering your classroom around consequences to try and control the behavior will not work. She saw a huge difference with her students when she started demonstrating love and respect for them. Her students gained trust with her, and it meant more of a mutual respect, which in all helped all their behaviors because they had more respect for their teacher. They had that extra connection. This teacher tells us that the best way to demonstrate care and compassion is by telling them often and in different ways how you're feeling, like how they should be feeling, how you're feeling, that just going that extra mile and not just asking about their day and not just saying, how's your day? Or like, what did you do today? Just something to show you care. And then another way is supporting them outside of the classroom. This is something that I didn't really see often, but some teachers do go to like sporting events and stuff to see their students. So another thing is when students act out, we can assume that something is going on outside of the classroom, and instead of embarrassing them in front of their peers, and which some teachers do, if they're acting out, they'll kind of call them out in front of everyone, which isn't really fair. It's best to talk to them face to face, and some teachers don't realize this because they probably just get annoyed really easily, which is understandable, but there's a better way to approach it and tackle that problem. Sorry. And then something we can do to create a positive environment is remembering that each day is brand new. It's a fresh start, a clean slate, and if you're constantly reminding your kids of their mistakes, they will just label themselves as the bad kid, and they'll feel that weight on their back that they shouldn't, and it's just not fun. Another easy way to show compassion is to take time and effort to understand the perspective while making good choices to provide the best learning experience for them. So showing compassion doesn't mean you're their friend by any means. Most teachers, when they start their career, will fall into that sort of trap of, how do I get my students to like me? Which your goal isn't really to be their friend, but to be their leader that they can trust. So compassion comes in handy more than we even know, is what I learned from this article, and that to base strategies off of compassion and showing support, teachers see a difference when this is shown. So the second article I read was called The Value of Compassion in Teaching. This author gives us 4 simple ways that we can model and promote compassion. She tells us that when she first began teaching, it was sort of a culture shock because she never knew all the troubles that her students would be facing on a daily basis outside of school. It was really scary for her. Her simple ways include practice what you preach, meaning teachers should model acts of compassion by complimenting students, caring about their outside life, and addressing any behaviors constantly, and positive reinforcement, stuff like that. The next one is care for a pet. This one is unlikely for most classes, I'm sure. I never had one, but it's allowing a pet in the room, and the teachers teach students about responsibility, and it's not just them, it's among their peers, and they all have to trust each other to take care of it. The next one is lend a helping hand. This is allowing students to engage in community service projects and diversity activities. It helps them learn how to care for others. Some examples are like canned food drives and the change drives, and also just volunteering in general. It provides them with knowledge of current events, of what's going on right now, as well as it gives them a way to create change for others and build self-esteem and confidence for them. The next one is play the compassion games. So this is a global competition that's online, and it's sort of a spin on the Hunger Games. A teacher can register their whole class, and teachers can play too, so it's cool that they can be involved. So students can compete in tracking their acts of kindness, and it instills principles of moral character on a global scale. So not just in your classroom, but it compares them to all other kids. And the last one is, it is important that we teach compassion to the kids so that they care for not only themselves, but for one another. That's kind of the main lesson in this article. It's just super important that we're not only focusing on teaching them compassion for, like, this is how I'm treating you. It should be, this is how you treat other people as well, and you'll see results. So the next article is called Empathy in the Classroom. Why should I care? So empathy builds a positive classroom culture. With the diversity offered, it is necessary for teachers to actively create a positive classroom environment. Yes, for sure. Students learn to understand each other, which helps build friendships and all, and they're also based on positive relationships of trust, which is awesome. And as mentioned before, this also gives a good student-teacher relationship that is so important. Empathy strengthens the community. As children learn these skills, it will transfer to their lives in the community, and it builds trust with extending beyond the walls of their classroom so they can use those skills outside of class. Lastly, empathy prepares students to be leaders. Leaders must understand the people that they lead and be able to show that they care. Empathy is a positive related quality to job performance, and it leads to success. So teachers should equip students to be future leaders for the community and for others. The fourth article I read was ways teachers can show they care. Okay, it was about getting to know your students and the lives they live, as we kind of looked at before, asking them about their culture, their lives, and their responses can give you ideas for a new curriculum that is more relevant to their lives, which lets them know you care, and I'm sure they'll do better on the material if it's something they can learn about that involves them. Actively listen to them. A teacher who listens is constantly checking in on them and asking them for feedback. And also making sure they understand the material and the content properly. This is something a lot of kids get too uncomfortable to voice that they aren't understanding, that something is confusing. So if you have that sort of compassion and empathy towards your students, then they'll probably feel more comfortable to voice that they aren't really understanding the lesson. So considering feedback, you're showing them that you value their opinions and their experiences, and this creates a classroom culture where your students feel safe to ask questions and take chances, which helps them grow academically. And then this author said something interesting. I thought it said to reflect on your own experience with care. So reflecting on how you were cared for as a child might give you insight to the kind of care that you might extend to your students to fit their needs. So if you liked something your teacher did, then you can also do that for them. Or if there's something you didn't like, then you can change that. So I think that's a cool one. And then I'm combining these last two sources because they're very similar. So the one author speaks about what compassion really means and that there are certain techniques that we don't really think about. To add some, they include personal connections, parent communication, asking better questions, expressing belief in their abilities, and being flexible and accepting failure when it happens. The author in the first article shares a really touching personal story about her school experience. She basically tells about how she had a rough time with her peers, and her teacher taught her a lesson that the actions of a single moment can make or break a child. It really proves a point. I ended with this one because it almost ties everything back in together, and it brings back that personal touch that I actually started my presentation with about my life, and I think that is the most important lesson about this because you really have no idea what difference you can make in a child's life. So it gives you that insight to that single person effect that I think is really important. And to close, I just want to say compassion in a classroom is more than necessary. It is crucial to developing a relationship with your students that is beneficial to not only yourself but to them, and I'm sure their parents too. There are so many techniques we've learned to gaining that much wanted trust with your students. A compassionate classroom is where students feel understood. Their voices are heard, they feel like they belong, they're encouraged to be the best version of themselves, and they gain a sense that their teacher actually cares about them and they're not just there to talk and give tests. It can change lives before you even know, and hopefully we can all benefit from learning these tips. Personally, my future goals are to use all of these and implement them in my own classroom to make sure that my students always feel that connection that is sought after without pushing too hard for it. I want everyone to feel super comfortable in my room, and I want anyone that has scenarios like me where something is going on at home or anything really, even with school, that they can feel confident to come to me and they can trust me and talk to me. So that is really the goal, and I just think, again, this topic is so important, so I think anyone can benefit from hearing a few tidbits about it. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and have a great end of your semester.